says it became clear that something wasn't right in the results of this year's election. Former Director of National Intelligence Richard Grenell has been fighting to get to the bottom of things. No one better, sincerely, to find transparency in this process than Rick Grenell. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Benny. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I have to say that, transparency is really important. It's not political. It's not partisan. It's something that we should be calling for at all levels of government. But for some reason, governments, whether they're local, state, or federal governments, have become accustomed to hiding information. And that's what we're up against in Nevada, is trying to figure out what the truth is, and yet having to face the facts that, we don't have the ballots, we don't have the envelopes, we only have information that points to irregularities, and we have a government, local government, that's totally unwilling to investigate, and they're just biding time because they're going to try to call the election with the information they have when they know the information is not that accurate.
That's right. You served as the Director of National Intelligence. Clearly, you saw many threats to America from abroad, clandestine threats. But it seems that mail-in balloting is a domestic threat to our country because it's so rife for fraud. And it's not me saying that. It's multiple nonpartisan studies and many, many experts for years and years, for decades. President Obama was against mail-in balloting. The Attorney General was against mail-in balloting. What is the look from your perspective going into the future when it comes to mail-in balloting? This year there was 100 million ballots sent out.
Let's also remember that the Democrats scrambled to make mail-in ballots a part of the process, literally the last 60 days before this election. Now think about that. They changed the way that people were going to vote the last 60 days. We did not have a plan. We have seen, and let me just be very specific about Nevada, we've seen recklessly throwing ballots into the mail. We've seen pictures of all of these ballots laying around in apartment complexes, in the mail rooms, in trash. And then the second step that Nevada officials did is they allowed ballot harvesting so that you could collect, you personally could collect a whole bunch of your friends' ballots, and then you could take them anonymously to a mail system, some sort of a postal system or box. So you combine the recklessness with the secretive aspect of collecting these and turning them in. You don't know who turned them in. We raised all of these questions in Nevada before the election, and what we were told unequivocally is it'll still be safe because we have the ability to check the signatures on those ballots. And that was the fail-safe before the election. Now what we're seeing, and this is just the fact of the matter, Clark County officials are using a machine to artificially read signatures and to compare them to make sure that they're correct. The factory settings for that machine have been lowered because they cannot compare signatures with the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles of Nevada signatures, because the signature is not clear enough to the DMV. And so Clark County officials said, we wouldn't be able to compare any signatures if we used the factory settings because the DMV doesn't use your signature in a very clear way. So we have to lower the factory recommended settings on this machine. And we believe that there's 200,000 ballots that recklessly went through the machine and were just approved when, if you used the normal factory settings, they would not have been approved.
Rick, quickly, how do Republicans stop this from happening in elections in the future?
Well, first of all, we need to launch a initiative to go after the idea of ballot harvesting. We need to clean up the voter rolls. Those are just absolutes. I will also say that when you talk to regular people across this country, no one in their right mind will say that you shouldn't have an ID. it's just a fringe group of Democrats in Washington, D.C. that somehow turn an ID demand into a racist procedure. And it's ridiculous. You have to have an ID to go on an airplane, and no one thinks that the airlines are racist for demanding an ID. We need to understand that the majority of people in this country think it's a no-brainer to have an ID. We need to have some sort of a federal mandate that you have to have an ID, and that would clear up a lot of these issues. I will also just finish by saying no one's against absentee ballots. The idea that you would request a ballot personally is a good thing. And what we're saying is you shouldn't recklessly mail ballots out to people who don't know they're coming, where you haven't checked where they live, and therefore it's a huge problem. And then you have a system where the signatures verification process is crap.
Rick, thank you for joining us, letting us see from your perspective as former Director of National Intelligence these incredible flaws in our system. I'd be remiss if I let you go without stating that you were the first openly gay cabinet member in American history, no matter what some publications are trying to claim. And we thank you for your bravery and your service in this administration. And to
Thanks, Benny. Good to be here.
Thanks, Rick. That does it for us here at the Benny Report. America is the greatest country in the world. America is worth fighting for. So keep memeing, keep criticizing, keep thinking, keep fighting. We here at the Benny Report are fighting right along with you. See ya.